This Windows setting gives you a free performance boost. Today we are having a look at hardware acceleration GPU scheduling, otherwise known as HAGS. What it does is it moves some of the GPU scheduling tasks or work from the CPU over to the GPU, or your dedicated GPU, to make sure things are running a little bit smoother and hopefully helping with performance. So does it actually work, and do we get a performance boost by turning HAGS on, or should we leave it off? We're going to have a look at that today, but for a quick word from our sponsor, Keysworlds.com. Keysworlds.com for cheaper Windows keys is Keysfans.com's sister website. They're currently offering us 25% off Windows licenses and also 25% off Microsoft Office licenses using code BEZ25. They also offer a Microsoft Office and Windows 11 bundle if you're into that as well. What's nice with them is they can also offer you Windows Enterprise LTSC and IoT LTSC as well, and they're super easy to deal with. All you have to do is go over to the link in the description, select which Windows version you'd like. So I'm going to pick IoT LTSC and press buy now. I'm going to add it to the cart. I'm going to view cart, then apply discount code, type in BEZ25. Awesome, there we go. I'm going to proceed to checkout, going to fill out my details, going to go ahead and place order. And what's awesome here is they have a PayPal checkout. You can also pay with crypto if you're into that, but PayPal is the most secure payment method. I've tested them out before and they're the same as Keysfan.com, so I'm happy to still say they're good to be recommended. So check them out, link in the description, use code BEZ25 for 25% off Microsoft Windows and Office licenses. I'll see you there at Keysworlds.com. For this test, we will be using the Ryzen 7 7800X3D with PBO enabled. We will have the RX 9070 XT as our graphics card, and its stock will be using 32GB of G-Skill DDR5 6000 CL30 RAM. Our motherboard is the ASRock X870E Taichi Lite with AMD SAM enabled. Our operating system is Windows 11 Pro 25H2, and for our AMD driver, please pay attention to this. So for our Windows 11 Pro HAGS on, we are using AMD driver 26.1.1, and for our HAGS off test, we are using 26.3.1. Testing settings, our CPU is on PBO, the GPU is stock with no overclock, all games are tested in full screen, games are tested one at a time, VSync is off, frame rate is on cap. Of course, we don't have any ray trace testing. DLSS and FSR, well, FSR in this case is off. AMD SAM is on. We're using AMD driver 26.3.1. Operating system is Windows 11 Pro 25H2, and all games are tested on a 3-run average. Let's head over to the games. First up, we have Counter-Strike 2 on 1080p low. As we can see here on our average FPS, there was a difference of 25 FPS in favor of when HAGS was off for our average FPS. There was also a difference of 21 FPS in favor of when HAGS was off as well for 1% lows. Now this is a bit of an odd title, as you guys will see. It's a bit of an outlier compared to the rest, as it's better to have HAGS off in CS2 from what I found on this 3-run average compared to when it's on. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty on 1080p medium. We can see here that it's pretty clear that there's not too much of a difference, but it is a net positive to have it on. We did increase our average FPS by 6, going from 194 to 200, and for our 1% lows, increasing it by 5 from 114 to 119. Not much of a difference here, but at least it's still something, but still within margin of error. Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered is up at 1080p on very high settings with TAA. We can see here there's not much of a difference when HAGS was on, so we only gained 3 FPS on our average FPS and just 1 for our 1% lows. Nothing much to say here, it's pretty much the same result twice. Marvel Rivals is the title that I was interested in when I was benchmarking these games after the CS2 result, and we've got here at 1080p with medium settings, TAAU at 100%. And we can see that our average FPS did go from 178 to 185 when HAGS was on, and we had a reduction in 1% lows of just 1 FPS. So I think it's cool to say here that for an esport title in comparison to CS2, we did gain a little bit, although not much. At least it was something compared to having it go the wrong way. Riftbreaker is up at 1080p on low settings, and yeah, this is our largest percentage difference between when HAGS was on and off in favor of when HAGS was on. So we went from 202 to 228, which is a difference of 26 FPS in favor of when HAGS was on, and we went from 103 to 116 for our 1% lows, which is an increase of 13 FPS. A good result here for Riftbreaker, and I'm happy to say we did have a positive impact by turning on HAGS here. Last but not least, we have Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 on 1080p Ultra TAA native. Now, there's nothing much to say here. There was just a difference of 1 FPS on average FPS, and the same goes for the 1% lows. So yeah, pretty much the same result again here twice. And I do have to say, for all the results, there's not much of an improvement to when we have HAGS on or off, but it's good to see as well it's not much of a negative impact on performance. So let's head over to the percentage difference graphs and see what we got. For our average FPS, as we can see here, having HAGS on was 0.9% faster on average FPS compared to when it was off at 1080p for these 6 games. So yeah, not too much of a difference here. However, individual games such as Riftbreaker had a 13% percentage difference in favor of when HAGS was on compared to when it was off. Marvel Rivals, Cyberpunk, and Horizon Zero Dawn were all positive, whereas Warhammer 40k was negative, and the same went for Counter-Strike 2. I do have to mention on Counter-Strike 2, despite it only being negative 3%, that still was a difference of a full 25 FPS. So yeah, a bit of a difference here on our average FPS for CS2 specifically. Next up, we have our 1% lows, and when HAGS was on, it was 0.9% slower on average 1% lows versus when it was off at 1080p for these 6 games. Again, similar story, we get 4 games here that are positive, and then we have Marvel Rivals, which is negative 1%, and Counter-Strike 2, of course, which was negative 7%. So it's pretty clear to me that you should probably turn it off when you're in CS2, but going for the other games, it's actually usually a positive thing to have it on. So overall, despite the net positive not being much, it's not something that you should have off per se, as it's not exactly a net negative to have HAGS on in the first place. Let's head on to my final thoughts. As we saw in the majority of the games when we had HAGS on, it was actually beneficial to have it there, as the performance did seem to improve over when it was off. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to get a huge performance boost, but it did mean that you are putting a little bit of gains on the table if you are leaving HAGS off. Now, specifically in CS2, we did find that it was better to have left it off because the performance was better when it was off than it was on. However, overall, it is not a net negative to leave this setting on. Personally, it is something that I have on myself, and it is something most larger reviewers have, especially on for benchmarking. I always leave it on. It's not something I turn off. It's something that you should have on for Windows, I think, today. Going on top of that, you also need it for DLSS and for upscaling, so you do have to have it on as well there. And yeah, again, it's not really a net negative to have this setting off. As a whole, hardware accelerated GPU scheduling should be on your computer unless you're specifically experiencing stuttering or any sort of odd behavior on Windows. I do know some people on lower end hardware do experience some issues with it, but if you're on modern hardware like we did for our test system that we use for benchmarking, yeah, you should be good to go. Definitely have it on. So that about sums up the video. Check out keysworlds.com for some more cheaper Windows keys. Check out wisetech.org for some more awesome content, but other than that, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!